Hi everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps. Today I'm going to show you how to join a beginning edge and an ending edge of crochet so that they look completely seamless, like they were totally worked together. Now if you want the edge to look absolutely seamless, like you worked this row and then turned your work and worked that row, you want to make sure that you're looking at the back side, the wrong side of the beginning row, because you're going to be working the right side of this row and then it'll look like you turned and worked that row. I haven't actually worked my last row. We're going to work that row into this one as we go. Now I know this color's a little dark and I apologize. This is just the color that my skein started with and I really wanted to show you on this project how it works. So I'm going to zoom way in so you can see the details of each stitch. And I'm actually going to show you up here first where it's a little lighter. Okay, so this is the wrong side of a half double crochet stitch. Do you see this little leg here and the big leg next to it? Those are the two legs we're going to be picking up and working into. This diagonal line here, that's from the yarn over. So we don't want that. We want the base of the stitch, which is these two little legs here, the little leg and the big leg down here. So looking down here at one of my stitches, okay, let's pull that apart and you can see there is the little leg, there's the big leg, and there's that diagonal line. So I'm going to be working into the little and the big leg, and this down here is the chain that we started with, and I'm going to be removing that entirely. So I want to make sure as I grab these loops that I'm not snagging that chain that's working under it. Okay, so I want to make sure I've got a really clean grab when I pick up these two loops. So let's get started. So I've done my turning chain, and before I do my first stitch, I want to connect this chain to the first stitch here. So I'm going to pull up that chain, okay, pull up that loop. I'm going to come in here and find my very first stitch. Look for those three loops that we talked about. There is that yarn over and there's the two legs. Okay, so I'm going to insert my hook into those two legs, but I can already tell this is tight and I'm going to need some help. So first, to make sure I get it nice and clean, I'm going to just take a needle and pull up on each of those two legs so that I can see them clearly and I can pick them up cleanly. Okay, now I want the yarn to go in the direction that this needle is going. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to insert the hook in the opposite direction so that when I pull the yarn through, it'll go through the way I want it to. So there's the first leg, and there's the second leg. Okay? Now when I pull this loop through, that yarn is going through the bottom of that stitch. Okay? Now I'm going to do a double crochet because I'm working a pattern, sorry, a single crochet. I'm working a pattern that alternates single and double crochets. So I'll do my first stitch, which is a single crochet, and then I'm going to repeat that with the next stitch here. So pick up, identify, and then pick up the two legs of the bottom of your stitch. Okay? Insert my hook like that, grab this loop, and pull it through. Now I crochet my next stitch, and you want to check your tension, make sure you're not making it super tight in between here. But now I crochet my next stitch, which in my pattern is a double crochet. So it doesn't matter which stitch you're doing because you're going to do the stitch, pull up your loop, and then connect it to the legs of the stitch before it, or the legs of the stitch on top of it. So now I'm being very careful because I'm picking up a loop underneath there as I'm trying to pick up this stitch. I'm connecting to that loop underneath, and I don't want to do that because that'll make it hard to rip out the starting chain later. So I want to be really careful that I'm getting just the legs I want and not any other strands from anywhere else. And that's a feel thing. You'll feel it when you pick it up. It'll be tight, it won't move properly. and that'll tell you that you're in the wrong spot. Okay, there we go. Loosen that up a bit and grab my loop and pull it through. And it doesn't matter if you twist your working loop a little bit, nobody's going to really notice because it's buried in that previous stitch. Now you can see how these stitches are joined to the stitches below them. Let me zoom out a little bit and you can see that. So you can see how I'm starting to join these stitches together, right? I'm going to do that all the way across the row and then I'll show you how to finish it off. Let me show you just one more before we go. I'm going to identify and pick up my 2 legs. There we go. Okay. Stick my hook into those 2 legs. And don't be afraid to take it out and wiggle it a few times if you need to. It's not the easiest thing to pick up, especially that one short leg. But you want to make sure that you're doing it carefully and you're getting just the leg and not anything else. Okay, there we go. So I got my 2 legs. Grab the yarn, pull it through, and do my next stitch, which in my pattern is a double crochet. Okay, I'll do that all the way across the row and I'll meet you at the end. Now this method works because this is how the stitches are connected normally. This top loop that I've got going through the bottom of the stitch here, this is what becomes the top of your stitch. See, as I do my next stitch, watch how this loop that was already on my hook becomes the top of the stitch. So this is that top V that you see when you work into the stitches, right? So that is this top V, and then we've got this line here, which is this line here, right? So this is actually how the legs of the stitch, like what the legs of the stitch work into. Look at where the legs of this stitch have worked into. It's that top V. Now, if you have other kinds of stitches that are connected in different ways, you can still do it, but it's going to be a little more complicated. Like if you have chains and stuff like that, you have to look at how the stitches connect and where they connect. Post stitches are the hardest. I probably wouldn't even try this with post stitches because it's so complicated how they connect, right? But even that is possible. You have to kind of work the whole stitch through the legs of the other row. But it is possible. So if you really study how the stitches are put together, study it on a different row here, study how they're put together, and then you can recreate that to join the rows. Now I've come to the last stitch here, and you can see these last 2 legs. There we go. Right there. And then I'm going to pull this through and work my last stitch here. And then when I'm all done, I'm just going to fasten off this yarn here so that it sticks out just like that. And now you can see from this side, it already looks completely seamless, right? It looks like these stitches are just worked into, looks like the purple stitches are just worked into the orange ones, right? But on the other side, if I flip this the other way, you're going to see that starting chain. So we still have to deal with that. We still have to take this out. Do you see that starting chain? I mean, you can leave it if you want, but like if it's going to be on the inside and not be seen, you could leave it. But I like to take it out because it also creates a little bump and it makes it stiffer. So we're just going to take this chain and start following. Pull on it a little bit and you'll see where it's coming out of. And just start following along, pulling that chain out as we go. And you'll start to see the legs of the stitch are now, instead of being attached to this chain, they're now attached to the stitch underneath. So let's just keep pulling this out nice and slow, because if you find a problem, you're going to want to sew it down either with a scrap piece of yarn or some sewing thread in case you missed a leg or something like that. But as we go, you can see each stitch nicely attached. Okay, so here's a spot where I split the yarn. Let me zoom in so you can see that. Here's a spot where I accidentally worked into the chain, and you can see that the yarn is split. I have two options, and which one I'm going to take depends on where I am in the seam and how much of a tail I have, because you want to make sure you have enough tail to weave in later. If I was over here, my only option would be to separate these strands so that I have enough of a tail to weave in. I am not that close to the end, but I do want to use this tail for sewing. So I'm going to go ahead and gently separate these strands of yarn, and then I'll twist them back together to sew with. But I'm going to go ahead and gently separate it all the way across. If I didn't need this tail, I could have just cut it, and then the end would separate very easily, and then I could continue ripping out. But now I've separated my two strands, and now I should be able to just pull it out and then grab these together and kind of let them twist back together again. And I can continue. Now when I get to the end, I have my starting chain here, the turning chain that was the chain one to get up to the height for the stitch. So I'm going to take this tail, because remember that turning chain should have come out of this first stitch, right? So I'm going to take my tail and I'm going to basically just weave it through that first stitch. Here, I'll use this. Grab my tail and pull it through that first stitch, and then maybe back up again in one of these loops here. And when I weave in my end, that will be nice and secure and even. Okay, there we go. So now that is a seamless join at the corners and all the way across. And if you straighten it out, you will see each of these stitches is now just coming out of the orange stitch, just as though you had crocheted them. And it looks completely seamless on both sides. And the cool part about this is now I have a tube with the stitches going in this direction, as opposed to if I had knit in the round where they would go in this direction. So useful if you want to create a tube. It's also useful if you decide you need extra rows at the bottom of something. You can crochet those rows and then attach it, like you're making a sweater and you want a little extra length on the hem. Okay, crochet a few more rows and then attach it this way, and nobody will ever know that those rows weren't there to begin with. And that is how you make a seamless join by grafting with crochet. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, or leave me a comment. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great videos. Thanks for watching.